no problem. Go on. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, but yeah, it just seems like, because it's like, it was like a core doctrine of theirs, that it seems like Muslims understand the need for
Hajj is a core doctrine for us.
Yeah.
It is one of the 5 pillars.
Yeah.
Hajj. But that's not the only way to seek forgiveness from God or seek salvation. There are other ways to do so. And this is why the Jewish people in the Old Testament, we are told, had a number of different ways to seek salvation. Blood sacrifice was not the only way to do it. There were other ways where Jews offered jewels and
that,
and flour,
but when you had
and
the day,
repentance.
when you had the Day of Atonement, which was only for the priests to do on the behalf of
like
the
we
nation.
have Hajj, there's only one day of Hajj in the year.
Yeah, but you don't do Hajj every year. But what I'm saying is, this was no. But as an individual, won't do it every year. But the priests were instructed to do this every year.
Because the Jewish community was very small.
Yeah.
It was confined to one particular area.
Yeah.
So all of them would have to come on that day. Yes.
Yeah, so then
but with Muslims, we know that's not possible.
Yeah,
God knows
but
that.
Then therefore you understand the
but
blood
we have to do
sacrifice.
Hajj once in our lifetime if we are able to do so.
Okay, and if you don't?
If we don't, then obviously the ability wasn't there. If the ability is there,
yeah,
you don't, then you're sinning. You're sinful.
Yeah,
you're sinful.
Okay. But if a Muslim doesn't do Hajj, that would not necessarily affect his salvation.
It
right?
will.
He won't go to paradise.
Quran says it will, yes.
So he won't go to paradise?
Yes, potentially. If he deliberately misses Hajj, having had the ability, the health and the wealth necessary for Hajj, and he still doesn't go for Hajj, he will potentially lose his salvation. Yes, Quran says that, and the Hadith says that.
So there's a lot of Muslims that don't make Hajj.
Yes, good luck to them.
So is this a warning to them?
Yeah, definitely.
That they
Yes. So likewise, I have understood the concept of salvation for the Jews as well as the Christians clearly. The reason why we disagree with the blood sacrifice of Jesus Christ is because Paul is alone in this when he claimed that blood alone can provide atonement. It is blood sacrifice only that will do the job. Paul is wrong in that.
Well,
Paul is plainly wrong about that.
But that was something that was established through whether it's the Passover or the Day of Atonement, because because obviously when you had the Day of Atonement, that was specifically and only.
First question is: was Paul right in claiming that blood sacrifice alone will atone for
because it was for.
Was he right in that?
Because it was based on the covenant. So the covenant was based on
Which
the shedding of. If you read Hebrews, it talks about for an old covenant to end and a new one to begin.
Who claimed this new covenant? Who claimed this new covenant?
What do you mean? Who claimed it?
Who actually claimed it? That it's there. The new covenant is there.
Well,
we know the old covenant.
During the Passover, when he said, obviously, when he's had the Last Supper and he's telling them, do this in remembrance. This is my flesh. This is my blood. Blah 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 blah. So he talks to them. This is a new covenant.
In the book of Matthew, Jesus said, when the man came to him and he said, "Master, what is the
but you said who established, because Jesus also talks about in the Last Supper where he says this is of the new covenant. So he talks, because you said who, and I'm giving you Jesus' word as well, where he talks about a new covenant.
Well, there's another question whether Jesus actually used those words or not. That's another question altogether. But let's assume he said it. What covenant is he talking about when he himself is telling people that you want salvation, follow the law?
Yeah.
Don't just follow my atonement, or when I will atone for your sins. He's not telling people that. A Jewish man came to him asking him, how do I attain salvation? Right? Jesus turns around and says, follow the law, follow the commandments. Right? Unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees, you will not have salvation. So what is Jesus talking about? Why is he playing these games?
Well, because there was obviously an old and a new covenant. So again, that's what
No, but this is Jesus talking.
Yeah, because Jesus lived under Judaism was the old covenant. So therefore,
the new covenant
but now Jesus is announcing the new covenant, right?
Well, it hadn't started. So the new covenants would have started with the shedding of blood. That's why, for example, with Abraham, and it had the circumcision, that was a sign of the old covenant.
So you're saying the atonement or the atonement salvation theory only applies after Jesus died.
What do you mean?
When you say the new covenant only starts after Jesus died, yes, are you claiming that atonement theory only applies after he died? Salvation through atonement.
Well, in terms of
Salvation
the new
through
covenant,
atonement. Yes.
well, the atonement started from the old covenant because the atonement would have been through.
No, you're still not understanding.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you to.
Okay. Yeah.
What are you trying to?
When Jesus was teaching people to attain salvation by a number of different ways.
Yes.
One of them was follow the law.
Yes.
Okay. And he didn't say anything about his dying on the cross for the atonement. Jesus didn't say anything like that. Okay.
Well, in terms of,
Is he playing games?
no, because
Because it's Paul who's doing the job later on. Paul is actually claiming all these things you're talking about. When Jesus was alive, teaching his companions, his disciples, how to attain salvation, why did he fail to mention clearly that I will die for your sins?
well, he did.
Very
He
soon,
said,
I will die for your sins very soon. I will atone.
well, he said this
For your-
temple will be destroyed in 3 days. I will raise it up again. So
Okay.
obviously he's talking
But that's
about.
not quite saying that I will die for your sins and I will be resurrected.
Yeah, because in terms of Jesus, like for example, when we start in the Old Testament, it talks about a new covenant will come in.
You're
So
still not
obviously-
getting my point.
Yeah, so
when
Jesus you're saying Jesus had to directly say,
Yes.
I'm going to die
Yes.
for your sins.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you have
if
to.
it's about salvation, he has to convey the message clearly.
Why?
He can't. How can you follow something when it's not clearly stated?
You know that Jesus was being ambiguous in many terms.
Was he
on
waiting for
purpose.
Paul to come to do
On
the job?
purpose.
Was
Wait, he
Jesus,
visited Paul.
huh?
He visited Paul
When?
on the way to Damascus, the road to Damascus.
Okay. So did Jesus not clarify the picture to his other disciples?
So in terms of the new covenant, because when Jesus was when he resurrected, he spent 40 days with them. So I presume he would have.
He's died.
Yes.
He has been resurrected, and he's walking around with his disciples. Did he teach his followers about salvation and atonement?
Well, in the Bible, it's not necessarily explicitly clear because it says
Would he have- would he have
says
taught?
he spent 40 days
Would
with
he
them
have taught?
teaching them about the scripture.
Okay, I know Bible is not clear about that.
Yeah.
Would he have taught
Would he have taught?
his close disciples, having been resurrected,
Yes.
having died for the sins,
Yes.
being resurrected, walking around with them, would they have understood the concept of salvation by that sacrifice?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yet they would have understood. Yes? Are you sure about that?
Yeah. Why wouldn't they? Because obviously.
Can we move down a little bit, guys? Sorry about this, yeah, because there's noise. I really want this discussion. You're saying they would have understood and Jesus would have taught that. Although it's not clear in the Bible, he would have done that, right?
Yes, because they
But
would
the
have.
Bible tells us clearly that they did not, his disciples did not understand that concept very clearly. I'll tell you why.
Okay, in what passage?
The book of Acts, chapter 15 and chapter 21, where they're still having debates about following the law. Paul is insisting we do not have to follow the Jewish law because of the new covenant. Jesus has died, his death has compensated for the law, right?
Yes.
Disciples like James
Yes.
and others, the Jerusalem Council, major disciples, elderly disciples of Jesus Christ. You're not listening to me.
So I've just got someone's phone. That's
Don't worry
why.
about it. Keep it.
I don't know.
Keep it.
They might have wandered off. That's why.
Yeah,
I'm
no
just trying
problem.
to see
Yeah.
that they
Listen
haven't
to me
forgotten.
and respond to me.
Okay.
Disciples
Yes.
are still
So-
talking about applying the Jewish law.
Yes.
Right? They are still insisting that Paul's sacrifices
Yes.
in the temple, if they understood the concept of salvation by the cross,
Yes.
clearly they would never ask Paul to go and sacrifice in the temple. Do you agree? Do you agree?
Well, it depends because when you look at Peter and he had the dream about God giving him a dream about what was unclean and unclean. So there's still some sort of things were given to them, but they still may not have fully comprehended because it was a process of still trying to understand certain things.
Do you realize what you're saying here?
Okay, guys, what am I saying?
You're saying the disciples are still not clear about the concept of salvation by the cross. Even though Jesus spent days with them, having been killed on the cross, having been resurrected.
But their thing wasn't necessarily about salvation, it's whether they still had to follow the law.
So you're telling me Jesus is walking around having been resurrected, having been killed on the cross, and disciples are still not clear on the salvation? On salvation by the cross.
That's two different aspects. So in terms of salvation and whether you still have to follow the law, they're two different things.
No. You don't have to follow the law if Jesus has atoned for the sins, because Paul is insisting you don't have to follow the law.
Yes.
Okay? Paul is insisting that you don't have to follow the law because Jesus has died on the cross.
Yes.
He is dead on the cross.
Yes.
We do not have to follow the Jewish law because the law is a curse, and that curse was lifted by the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. Yes, Paul was very clear on that. Was James clear on that? The leader of the Jerusalem Council, the leader of the Christians living in Jerusalem.
This is why the Holy
was
Spirit
he clear
came.
on this?
This is why the Holy Spirit came. You know, Jesus said he had many things.
Let him respond, please.
Yeah, go on. Say that again.
Was James clear on that? Like Paul was? James spent days with Jesus Christ. Years. 3 years of Jesus' ministry. James was there all the way. Paul comes along. He has never met Jesus. He sees a vision.
No, I don't think James was there all the way.
He was.
No.
But James was the brother of Jesus, according to some indirect references.
Because James became more of a follower after the resurrection.
Okay.
He didn't.
Okay, even, look,
Sorry,
first of all, you cannot prove that from the Bible. That's an assumption you're making based upon some vague references in the Bible, right?
Well, in terms of, I think it's the story where, what did Jesus say? Something like, a prophet's not. He said, there's a passage where his family, they don't.
We agree that James was a direct disciple of Jesus Christ, who met Jesus directly, spent time with him. He was present at the Last Supper. He was one of the 12. He's one of the 12. He's one of the 12.
Yeah, but he wasn't convinced straight away.
Okay, let's say when he's become convinced, he spent some time with Jesus Christ. He met him. Okay, he was there at the Last Supper. He was one of the 12 disciples. Yes, which means he's a very important figure. Right? He is not clear about the role of the law. Paul is, who never met Jesus, sees a vision on the road to Damascus, and he comes out with a new idea that law is completely, we don't have to follow it because the curse of law has been lifted by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. James is not clear on that. And how do we know this? James is still insisting in chapter 15 of the book of Acts. Don't get upset if you don't have any responses. Don't get upset. This is what I don't know what the problem with Christians is. Is it what kind of psychosis is? When you don't have responses, they start getting upset. So I am asking, chapter 15, the book of Acts. James is asking Paul to let the Gentiles still follow the guidance of God.
Get Romans chapter 3 verse 31.
And do not eat any meat offered to the idols.
Get Romans chapter 3 verse 31. If you talk bad about the Bible, God will smite people.
The Holy Spirit fed up of them.
They're filled with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not talking. Holy Spirit
killing people that
for
was doing
2,000
that.
years.
You know that,
He's talking.
That's what Paul's famous for. Killing people that talk bad and against the scriptures, bro. Be careful. Every idle word shall be accountable for in the day of judgment, bro.
Be careful.
So don't say lies on the Bible, cuz Paul didn't come saying that the law was done away with. He says, I myself, I'm a Benjamite. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. I'm an Israelite. And you have to keep the laws.
You will not have any benefit.
Bro, please don't say that again. I've spoken to you before. Don't say that again. That is pressure, bro. These are the end times coming soon. Don't put no light on my face. The end times are coming soon.
Thank you.
What do you mean chill, fam? I'm talking to the Israelite. I don't go into heathens, bro.
We'll have a discussion.
Bro, we're gonna have to talk about that.
He's an Israelite. Does he look like an Israelite to you? Come on, man. He's African. He's African.
Well, obviously, I don't agree with people Israelite theology.
Of course. As you know, it's absurd. But anyway, coming